Hello everyone, welcome to the What If Anime YouTube channel. Today, we're diving into an exciting new story that will take your imagination to the next level. Let's get started. Naruto had Angel's Eyes power. Chapter 1, Ninja Technolover. Hinata made sure that the hallway was clear before she darted inside the music room. She breathed a sigh of relief and sagged against the door. Her window, her addiction, the freedom to express, she gazed over at the glossy finish. She stood up and made her way over to the piano. She sat on the bench and ran her fingers gently over the worn keys. She just sat there, thinking of what to play. Finally, after some careful thoughts, she decided to play one that she had written a few weeks back. She hadn't actually gotten a chance to play it yet. Hinata placed shaking hands over the keys. First it started out with slow soothing arpeggios, then it went to chords and melody. Just after the slow arpeggios finished, she started to sing. The words easily came, and they flowed out of her mouth without hesitation. Prologue. Spend all your time waiting for that second chance for a break that would make it okay. There's always one reason to feel not good enough, and it's hard at the end of the day. I need some distraction. Oh beautiful release, memory seeps from my veins. Let me be empty and weightless, and maybe I'll find some peace tonight. In the arms of an angel, fly away from here, from this dark cold hotel room and the endlessness that you fear. You were pulled from the wreckage of your silent reverie, or in the RMS of the angel. May you find some comfort there. So tired of the straight line, and everywhere you turn there's vultures and thieves at your back, and the storm keeps on twisting. You keep on building he lie that you make up for all that you lack. It don't make no difference escaping one last time. It's easier to believe in this sweet madness, oh this glorious sadness that brings me to my knees. In the arms of an angel, fly away from here, from this dark cold hotel room and the endlessness that you fear. You were pulled from the wreckage of your silent reverie. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort there. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort here. As the song slowly died away and the ringing slowly left the piano, the tears fell from her eyes and dripped onto the keys, making loud sounds that echoed throughout the room. She wiped her eyes and then the piano with her sleeve. She stood up, nearly knocking over the bench. She ran out the door, down the hall. Hinata, I didn't know you were still here, Shizune exclaimed with a smile on her face. Hinata waved. She did not want her to see her tear-stained face. She jumped down the marble steps 2 at a time. She slowed down and started walking home in a dazed state. Suddenly she glanced down at her watch and grimaced. Hinata started running haphazardly down the road at a breakneck pace. Not seeing Thrug, her tear-glazed eyes, she ran blindly into something rock hard. She froze as she waited to feel the hard asphalt. She closed her eyes tight and waited. Nothing happened. She opened one eye and saw concerned blue orbs staring back. It was then that she felt the sharp pain in her sides. He must have grabbed me, Hinata thought. She winced as his grip tightened as he set her on her feet again. She gasped. Her bruised ribs screamed in protest. I'm so sorry. Hinata managed to get out. He gave a small smile in return. He slowly walked around her and continued walking. She watched him until he went around a corner. I didn't even get his name. Not 5 seconds later she was back running, dreading the fact that she was late. Late, her mind chanted at her. She burst through the door and shut it quietly, hoping to avoid confrontation or at least prolong it. She placed her shoes on the mat and opened the door into the kitchen. She saw what she had been dreading the most. Her stepfather came stumbling into the room. She could tell that he had been drinking for most of the day. His eyes were bloodshot, and she doubted he even recognized who she was. She took a step forward and bowed deeply. Hiyashi-sama. It hardly came out louder than a whisper. Hinata, he yelled in her face and wrenched her face by her chin to face him. The stench made her stomach twist. Why are you late? You were meant to be home hours ago. He continued on for a while, sometimes mumbling and slurring curses, and other times full out yelling. In actuality Hinata had only been late by 4 minutes, but she wasn't about to tell him that. I'm sorry, it won't happen again, she said. You were right, it won't, he said in a cold voice. That was when her world went black. She woke up with a cushion, judging by the continuous pounding in her head. Hinata felt like she had been through a blender and lived to tell the story. By the way her body was feeling, she somehow didn't doubt that it as probably what she looked like as well. She looked up and was confused to see the basement ceiling above her head. She looked down at her legs. Upon seeing them, she winced as she slowly bent them out of their weird position on the stairs. She grabbed onto the railing and heaved herself up. But when she heard the crunching of glass, she nearly passed out again. She looked over her shoulder and ULDC tiny shards of dark glass reflecting her wide eyes. Now that she thought about it, she couldn't even feel her left arm. Hinata couldn't do anything until she got up the stairs. She dragged her broken body up the stairs. She only had two left when her body wouldn't listen to her commands. She gave in to the pain, and her world went black again for the second time that day. She grudgingly opened her eyes to see nearly all white. Only a few accents of color were added throughout the room. Neji's room. Why was she here? She couldn't be here. Hinata panicked and tried to get out of the room as fast as possible. But as soon as she started to move again, her body writhed in agony. She cried out, although it was muffled. She stopped struggling when she heard faint footsteps running up the stairs. She shrank as far away from the door as she could. The footsteps paused behind the door. A small whimper escaped from her mouth. Neji stepped through the doorway, a concerned look on his face. His usual facade was gone, and in its place was a look of worry. Hinata decided that it simply did not fit. He came and stood next to the bed, a good 3 feet away from the bed. "Hinata, I know you are awake," he spoke in a near monotone voice. She poked a bruised face out of the warm bed sheets to prove to him that she was listening. Hinata didn't think that she could talk right at that moment. She just stared blankly at him. "You can't let it go on like this." He raised his voice the tiniest bit. Her eyebrows lifted up out of sheer surprise. "Why do you let him treat you like this?" Her face fell. "I don't let him. I don't have a choice." She thought sadly. "Gee, this is the only way that I'm going to be able to get all of my education, and Neji, please understand that I don't have any other options," she replied. Her voice was hoarse from overuse. He looked disappointed. He really did want the best for her. Never would he ever wish for this to happen to her. He did his best to be home, but sometimes he just couldn't be there to protect her. "Roll over." Hinata reluctantly rolled over with a little bit of difficulty so that she was on her stomach. Neji reached out and peeled away the gauze bandage that had been placed over her left shoulder. The glass was no longer there, even though the inflamed area of her skin were prominent against her porcelain-like skin. Tears threatened to trickle out of her eyes, but she made no sound of her distress. He put some alcohol on a swab and as gently as he could disinfected them. Her shoulder felt like it was on fire after he was done. He replaced the bandage after putting on a cooling cloth on it. "Did I need stitches?" she asked, her voice steady. "No, they weren't deep enough to need that," he replied curtly. After the entire ordeal was done, Hinata was exhausted. With a bit of prodding and convincing, she let Neji carry her to her room. The sad, dark attic had one bed in the corner and a dresser on the other side, but other than that the room was barren. He laid her carefully on the bed as if she might break. He pulled the small sheet up to her chin and left the room. Only then did Hinata let herself cry. Naruto was just walking back to his place when a girl came out of nowhere and ran full speed into him. Out of pure reflex did he actually catch her in time. She let out a wince and then she opened her eyes. The lavender hue was contrasted by her indigo hair that was cut around her face. In a framing sort of way, the rest of it was piled on the top of her head. She gasped in what seemed to be pain, but as she started talking, he thought he must have imagined it. I'm so sorry." She struggled to get her words out. He set her down on her feet and smiled. Then he continued walking around her and walked to his apartment. Naruto didn't know what to think of the shy girl. He walked to his new apartment and then, noticing how dark it was, started to jog. He got there and took his shoes off and went to get some supper. Tomorrow he would have to go and try to register for his grade 12 year at the school just down the road. He wasn't sure what he was going to do after graduation. Plus he had to figure out how he was going to balance his normal life with Secret One. Sounds mysterious. He rolled his eyes at himself. He mulled it over, and after eating a quick supper went to bed. Tomorrow old be a new experience to say the least. Chapter 2. Chapter 1. Tilda Ninja Technolover. Sunrise. Well, 6 a.m. wasn't feeling the greatest right about now. As Naruto stretched on his futon, his back cracked. After the morning ritual was done, he flopped back down onto his pillow, the tears leaking out of the corner of his eyes during his long yawn. He threw off the covers, certain that if they stayed on he would just go back to sleep. Naruto's groggy mind got himself to the bathroom where he had a quick shower, brushed his teeth and got dressed. He went into his kitchen looking around in search of something edible. He found some instant ramen in the cupboard and boiled some water. He sat down at the table and started to eat. He looked up to see the time. It was 6:33 a.m. The big letters making high want to crawl back under his warm sheets. He snapped out of his daze and put his container into the trash can. He grabbed his keys as he went out the door. Naruto locked his door and started the fun trip down the 4 flights of stairs. It was fun only because the banister was just wide enough to comfortably slide down the entire way. He made it in approximately 20 minutes. He only took notice it so he could be sure for his school mornings. This was excluding the amount of time that it took to go and ask directions from another early riser. That hadn't been embarrassing or awkward in the least. Finally he made it to the front steps. The school was massive. Beautiful detailing was all around the foundation. It had a set of double doors at the front which opened up into a high arched hallway. It branched off into unknown places. He had the urge to go and look into the windows but restrained himself. He wasn't sure that the secretary would really appreciate it. At the end of the grand entrance was a petite woman with brown hair. She was sitting in a desk in front of a beautiful water feature. He walked up slowly, a little intimidated by all of it. More and more students started filing in. Naruto stood there for a few minutes before he gave up and cleared his throat. This apparently startled the woman and he found it hard to not be amused by the small noise that escaped her mouth. "What may I help you with, sir?" Her voice slowly escalating into a high-pitched squeak. "I was wondering where I could register for the school year," he replied, struggling to keep the amusement out of his tone, yet failing miserably. The poor woman's face turned a slight twinge of pink. Her mouth formed a small O shape. "Right this way." Her sentence remained unfinished as she looked at him. "Uzumaki, Naruto," he filled in with a bit of accent dropping in. "Uzumaki-san." She continued like she never stopped talking but gave him a weird look. She didn't recognize that accent from anywhere. They walked into a space to the right of her desk and to an oak door. The woman straightened her jacket and then knocked on the door. "You may come in." A muffled, female voice came through the wood. Naruto and the women walked in. But she stayed at the door while he scooted to the side of the room. "Tsunade-sama," she started. "Uzuma," she was abruptly interrupted by the blonde woman. "Shizune, where is my coffee?" she demanded, now turning to face them. She had honey brown eyes, and her golden hair was pulled back into a messy bun at the back of her head. "I'll get it right away," but she was interrupted again. "No buts. First coffee, then information." The principal sighed, rubbing her forehead with her thumb and forefinger. Naruto's head went back and forth between the two women. Single quote. Shizune had gone to get coffee, so he waited until either the principal noticed him or until she told her about him. He stood by, waiting patiently. Shizune showed up about 5 minutes later with a steaming cup of coffee in her hand. "Tsunade-sama, here is your coffee." She set the mug on her desk waiting for a response. "Thank you. You may go now. One more thing, you have someone waiting to see you." "All right, send them in," she said, sipping at her coffee. Naruto cleared his throat. Tsunade nearly spat out her coffee everywhere. After she had composed herself, her facial expression changed. Instead of the harsh expression, it was pulled back into a strained smile. "Ah, Shizune, you didn't say that he was already here," she said, shooting a look at Shizune. "What's your name, kid?" she asked, the smile still in place. "Naruto Uzumaki," he replied quickly, not really liking the woman. "And what can I do for you?" One of her eyebrows raised. "I am wanting to register for my grade 12 year here." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. "Here," he said, passing it to her, "is all of my papers, including the ones that confirms that I am qualified to come to this school." "Yes." He took out the papers and continued going through them. Her eyes slowly got bigger. "Top of the class, This guy. She looked back down, then back up at him. She looked over what he was wearing. It consisted of black tapered jeans, a black t-shirt, and a button-up, orange and black striped jumper over top. His hair was shaggy, and he had jaw-length bangs that framed his face, and kinda like Monato's. One of the pieces near the front was dyed black. On his face he had 3 whisker-like scars. His color palette. She shrugged and started to dig through her file cabinet. I'll just get you to fill these out, assuming you are 18, or older, she said, handing over the forms. Yep, he said, accepting them. He sat down at her desk and chatted a bit while he did the necessary paperwork. All right, is there anything else that you need? Besides tuition, I mean, he said, passing them back to her waiting hands. I'll be expecting a continuous stream for the tuition, but other than that, as long as you follow the rules that have been set out, I don't think so. Naruto scooted out from the desk and stood up. See you tomorrow then. He walked back out into the hallway. Shizune motioned him over. I'll be giving you a tour now, and I'll go over your schedule with you. She led the way down main hallway that branched off into others. The grade 12's main hallway was at the very end and to the left. The classrooms were typical, even though he could only see through the window. He got many weird looks as he peeked into the rooms. One of the rooms that particularly caught his eye was the music room. Shizune's phone went off, but before she went she waved to the room with her hand and walked off quickly. Naruto walked towards the door and opened it and went inside, closing it after himself. He was startled to see a guy sitting there with a cello looking straight at him. Though it felt as if he was staring right through him. He was pale and had dark hair with bangs that hung over his eyes. His dark brown eyes were nearly black, although they were a bit faded and clouded over. Hey, I'm the new kid around here. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he said, walking over to shake his hand. He looked up and held out his hand as well after putting his bow in his other hand. I'm Sasuke Uchiha, he said, shaking his hand. When did you start playing? Naruto waved towards the cello. When I turned 10. Enjoyed every year. Sasuke forced a smile. I've got a feeling that enjoyed isn't the right word. Naruto replied. So what is your role in the class? You were very talkative, Dobi. He paused, then looked up. I try to keep my position as the top. He smirked. I'm hoping that I can change that soon enough. Naruto grinned. He didn't know what to think of the raven. After a few seconds of thought process, Dobi. Sasuke made an amused sound. Yeah, Dobi. Fine, Tem. It was that moment that Shizune walked back in. Sasuke-san, she said, nodding in his direction. Come on, Naruto. I need to go over the rest of your schedule. Later, Sasuke. Naruto waved. As Naruto and Shizune left, they heard the cello being played. Not only the kid was good at schoolwork, but also the arts. Naruto was quite pleased. Some decent competition at last. Your first class will be with Mr. Kakashi Hatake in Math 30-1 at 8:45, and second will be English with Mr. Baruka Yumino from 10:02 to 11:49 when lunch begins. She led him to the cafeteria. About 5 students were in there, due to a spare. Shizune gave him the go-ahead as she took another call. He walked over to a table. At the table were 3 guys. The first one had long brown hair that he kept back with an elastic and had brilliant white eyes with a strange purple hue to them. He looked like that girl that had run into him yesterday. He made a mental note to ask him about it later. The second was wearing some serious eyeliner. It went all the way around his eyes, and his hair was a natural fiery red. The third one didn't seem to be doing much. In fact, he seemed to be asleep. New transfer student, the first one asked. Unfortunately, came Naruto's reply. He seems optimistic enough. The elk, or otherwise knows redhead, spoke to the one with his head down, while poking him. Absolutely. The not-so-asleep pineapple head's response. I never was known for the best first impressions. The name's Naruto Uzumaki, he said, liking the trio already. Obviously not. I'm Gaara, the elk said, this time directly to him. Shikamaru. The guy still hadn't lifted his head, which peeved Naruto a bit. Neji, the only somewhat normal one here. He finished. Gaara rolled his eyes. Oh please, where are you from? I don't recognize your accent. Neji asked. UK, with a few others mixed in. I'm not surprised you didn't recognize it. He grinned. Ah, Neji seemed to lose interest. I'll probably see you guys around then. Right. Shikamaru, yup, Neji. Sure. Gaara, they all said it simultaneously. It was kinda creepy, or at least Naruto thought so. He weaved himself between the tables to one that had two girls sitting there chatting about something in the textbook. They both looked up when they saw him approaching. Hello, he stated, not really meaning to put that much accent into it. He immediately regretted it by the look in the pink-haired girl's eyes. Hey, my name's Sakura. She said it with a bit too much enthusiasm to be just friendly. He inwardly groaned, having the urge to slam his head, repeatedly, into a brick wall. Hi, my name's Ino. She had platinum blonde hair. They looked at him expectantly. Oh, he said, scratching the back of his neck, I'm Naruto. He replied, a little freaked out by the analyzing stare. Fortunately for him, Shizune called him back to finish going over his schedule. He ked back to her rather quickly while looking over his shoulder and gave a quick wave. Once he caught up to her, she continued, after lunch you will have physics with Mr. Ibiki Morino at 12:39, until your option, which is music 30. That will be from 2:08 to 3:32 p.m. She shuffled through her papers, double-checking everything. Who will be teaching me music then? Naruto asked, shuffling his feet a bit. You'll be teaching yourself mostly. We just recently had to get rid of the music teacher. He was a creepy one. The woman got a distant look in her eye. All of a sudden it was like she came back to earth. And as one of the top students you will be expected to tutor another student. She looked up to face him. Any other questions? Naruto shook his head. See you tomorrow then, nice and early. Naruto groaned quietly. Shizune chuckled. Thank you, he said as he turned to go, but he turned back when he realized that he hadn't been told what to call her. Shizune is just fine. She smiled warmly. Thanks, I gotta go now, bye. He smiled and walked quickly towards the door. Crap, late for my practice. He made it back to his apartment in record time. He grabbed his stuff, including his hand wrappings and water bottle. He bolted out the door and down the 4 flights of stairs, and once outside started running again. He got to the abandoned building feeling sticky and out of breath, but at least he made it, well, sort of. Naruto opened the side door and poked his head in. He was met with the smell of dust and just overall stuffiness. He stepped through and walked into a dark hallway. He followed the sounds until he reached a large archway with a huge door. He knocked, and everyone inside went silent. A single pair of footsteps came towards the door. A beautiful girl opened up the door, and when she saw him, opened it up. Haku, Naruto asked. He blinked a few times as if to make sure. Hey Naruto, long time no see, eh? He jumped on her, giving her a huge bear hug which was gladly returned. He was the first to withdraw and saw many people whom he had not seen in a long time. There was Deidara-san, Maru-kun, Sumatra-chan, Tobi-kun, Konan-chan, Nagato-san and a few others that he didn't recognize. The room came alive again and the match in the middle of the room continued. He gazed around the room until he found what he was looking for. A huge man, with a long, near white, spiky ponytail that went all the way down to his waist. Jiraiya, his teacher and parent since his parents died when he was a kid. He took him in and trained him. Naruto would always be thankful for that. He walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. He looked across and then down. A smile lit up his tired face. Naruto couldn't help but smile back. Hey Naru-kun, he said in his deep voice. Naruto felt a weird sense of nostalgia. Hey old perv, his voice playful. Jiraiya grinned. How've ya been? Jiraiya asked inquiringly. Naruto sighed. It's always a pain moving around so much. Though, at the school though there seems to be a few interesting people. Jiraiya hummed and looked down at him. You ready to start up again? Always. Chapter 3. Hello, my pretties. Oh. Well, now that is out of my system, I just want to make one comment. Hinata is going to be sort out of character. She has a bite, but she still stutters, still blushes, just not as much. She is much more badass. No, that is not the right word for it. I'll think about it. Chapter 2. Tilda Technonangelover. Hinata was just getting her stuff together for school when Neji came and knocked on her door. She didn't respond and continued to place her binders in her bag. Hinata started to zip it up, but grimaced slightly when the zipper got caught in the black lace on her hands. Neji gave up and waiting and opened the door slightly. "Are you ready to leave yet?" he asked in an impatient tone. "Why yes, I was coming, Neji Onisan," she replied while placing her bag over her shoulder. She came down the stairs careful not to trip. She didn't want to cover up any more bruises than she already had to. Neji looked over to see her coming down the stairs. Stupid goth, he thought. She was wearing a black dress that clung to her figure slightly, but moved away from her hips down to where the dress ended at knee length. Around the cuffs, straps as in the straps are separate from the cuffs, off the shoulder cuffs if you catch my drift. And the scooping neckline was black lace. The black lace was the same as the lace in the fingerless gloves. The small amount of crinoline at the bottom of the dress got in her way as she sat down on the step to lace up her boots. Why she didn't get something easier or at least boots with a zipper, he did not know. When she had finally finished they were out the door. The ride to the corner was long and silent. Since Neji preferred not to be seen with her he dropped her off at the corner before the school. She started walking towards the school, her back straight, but her head low. Her waist long, indigo black hair swaying. She got there with 15 minutes to spare. She had been unable to show up at the school for the first 3 days, but Neji had kept her up to date and had gotten her schedule for her. She went directly to her locker ignoring the stairs. She placed her bag in before she felt a hand on her lower back. She stiffened and turned around to look at whoever would dare to touch her. She was surprised, to say the least, to see Sasuke, her close friend during middle school. His blindness seemed to have gotten worse since she had last seen him. She smiled and gave him a hug which was gingerly returned. Some fangirls glanced and had to take a double take. Just because he was partially blind didn't mean that he was any less gorgeous or intelligent. She pulled back and looked him over. Even though she had grown throughout the 3 years she was gone, it was minuscule compared to Sasuke's newfound height. She stood comfortably at 5'6", without any help from platforms, but Sasuke was at least 5'11". It totally blew her mind and made her realize how much time had passed. It also made her fear as to how much more could have changed, besides their height. All her fears were smothered by his small smile. It was rare for her to have the privilege of seeing him smile. She smiled back. "Sasuke, it's been so long since I last saw you." She was proud of the fact that she only stuttered twice. "It's good to hear you again." His smile lessened but came back as she melded their hands together, just like they used to in their younger days. The lace in the smooth, cool hand comforted him greatly. The first bell interrupted them and she let go of his hand and scrambled to get her binders out of her bag. When she turned back around, he was gone. Hinata tried to hide her disappointment by looking over her schedule. Her day started at 8:45 a.m. with math, with Kakashi Hatake. She glanced quickly around. The numbers, 301 standing boldly against the dark stain of the wood. She walked quickly towards it, and just as she opened the door the second bell rang. She breathed a quiet sigh of relief. She looked up to see the entire room staring up at her. Save for her cousin, she gulped and went down the aisle to find her seat in the alphabetically organized seating. She swore that she would never cut it that close again. She found her seat at the very back, Neji directly in front of her. She plunked down quietly and looked to the front of the room. Kakashi Hatake was a mystery, from the very beginning of the class. All 2 minutes of it. He hadn't said anything yet and was still reading, ignorant of the fact that the second bell had indeed rung. A kid near the front cleared his throat. "Mr. Hatake looked over the top of his book, gave a look of indifference at the kid at the front and looked up at the clock, squinting through his bold black frames. "I'll give you 25 minutes to get the questions on pages 5 to 12 done." He dropped his gaze back down to his book. The class looked at him in disbelief. "Clock's ticking," he reminded, his voice taunting. There was a scramble of papers flying and a few confused groans. A few students put up their hands, but to put them back down after waiting several minutes for him to notice them. Hinata had half of the required questions done when the first bell rang, signaling that the class was half over. She felt the urge to slam her textbook shut and then use it as a pillow, but decided against it and instead stretched. She let her head lean out of the designated desk area, and her hair flowed out beside her. She ignored the "what the heck is she doing?" looks. She loved the idea of being at the back, free to do her work, or not that it really mattered in this class anyway. She blew out a puff of air. She gazed around the room after sitting back in her desk properly. The only people that had really caught her eye was a girl with pink hair who was sitting on the other side of the room chewing away on her pencil, and a guy who was sitting in front of Sasuke. He has the brightest blonde hair. Instead of the dirty blondes or the platinum blondes, it was the strangest shade of yellow. They seemed like they would be cool people to meet. She did a double take on the guy. He looked really familiar. Her face heated up as she remembered the incident. Running home, him catching her so she wouldn't fall on her face, in an epic fail kind of way. This time she let her head collide with her textbook. The sound felt exaggerated, like it echoed throughout the room. Kakashi did look up from his book now. "Miss Hinata, please refrain from disrupting my class," he said with an eye smile. He had his book all the way down now. Only the top part of his face was visible. A scarf was wrapped around the bottom, nose down. She looked at him, appalled by the idea of wearing a scarf in the 30-degree weather. Nonetheless, she propped up her head in her hands and glared at the people still staring at her. Most of the gazes quickly faltered and went back to their problems. When she got to a certain blonde, he did not look away. In fact, he looked harder. His possibly blue eyes looking deep into her own. She felt so exposed and readable. She hated feeling like this. She pushed down a blush that was threatening to show on her pale skin. She couldn't take it any longer and turned away. Looking out the window, it was beautiful. The sun was slowly being overtaken by the rain clouds that were approaching fast. Lightning flashed amidst the dark clouds. It was breathtaking. She hardly noticed when class ended. She picked up her math textbook and looked at her schedule to see what was next. English in room 211. She walked to her locker, squeezing by people when necessary. Her shoes were rather loud against the tile. She went to her locker and opened it up and grabbed her binder. She shut it to come face to face with scruffy-looking figure. He had own hair that stuck up in all directions and triangular markings on his face. He was feeding a puppy. Inside his locker, she gave him a look, figured it was none of her business and headed off to find the right room. She wandered the hallways before coming to her destination. The walls were painted a minty blue and the marble floors had a different angle different than that of the hallway. She danced around the room, observing that she was the fourth person there. Fifth, if you counted the teacher. She looked at the sheet that was beside the doorway. It was the same as the seating in the other classroom. She felt giddy as she took her seat in the back again. A girl with long blonde hair in a ponytail came and sat in the desk next to her, with the intention of talking to her. She would after not have her good move ruined by some blonde, but she complied and turned around to face her. "You know that Uzumaki guy, right?" She started her baby blue eyes looking sharply at the blonde who was in her math class just a few minutes ago. Hinata gave her a confused look and glanced as to where she was pointing. It was the same blonde that she had run into and now had an awkward staring contest with. "No, I is not the right word, but I was aware of him, yes," Hinata said, replying to the blonde beauty. She gave Hinata a weird look for the way she worded things in the stutter but moved on. "Anyway, did you know that he is a new transfer student?" Hinata raised a slender eyebrow. She had come over to talk to her about this. Hinata nodded her head slightly. "Well, I hear that he is not staying on campus," she said excitedly. Hinata silently wondered why this girl was telling her all of this, and why it was exciting to her. "So," Hinata asked, voicing her thoughts. "What do you mean, so? He is so hot," she exclaimed, disbelieving. "What does that have to do with him living off campus?" Hinata replied with a bored expression. The bell rang, signaling for the students to get in their desks. Mr. Yumino turned around from his position in the swirly chair. He was short, for a grown man. His hair was pulled into a ponytail at the back of his head. He also had a scar that went across the top of his nose. Hinata wondered how he had gotten it. "Ino, sit in your own desk please," Haruka said while making his way to the front of the room. Ino looked up sheepishly to the kid who wanted to sit in his desk. He looked quite irritated and Ino quickly scrambled out of the desk. He took his place and focused his attention at the front. Hinata zoned out for the beginning of class, but was pulled back by the words, 30% of your mark. Her eyes widened noticeably. Apparently we were doing portfolios. They counted for 30% of the final mark. Hinata gulped. Maybe she should have paid more attention. For one of the rubrics you are going to be required to do some group work, he said calmly while flipping through his papers. Whispering erupted from the room. Be quiet. The groups are going to be assigned. The majority of the class sighed aloud. Hinata just inwardly cried out in despair. No big deal, a group assignment. Oh, who was she kidding? Hinata gulped nervously. Please let her have Sasuke on her group. She pleaded against the odds and looked up at the ceiling. It was a white color. Temporarily distracted, she heard names being called. She focused back on the teacher. Hinata had always preferred to do things on her own, and she had planned on keeping it that way. The teacher had other plans though. For the second time that day she felt like slamming her head into something. This is sort of like the seating arrangement. It's a little confusing, because there are several of each last name, but this is what I was picturing. In the space between Y and Z is a support. So it sorta works. I'm working on chapter 3, so I'll have that up soon enough. Diwamata, AIQ, BJR, CKS, DLT, EMU, FNV, GOWYZ. Chapter 4. Hey guys, I don't really have anything to say, except for review. When I read a story I usually just get a subscription to a story, but now I realize that it just puts pressure on me. Even if it's just a smiley face I would be overjoyed, as do a little booby all around the room, and would therefore make you happy through my embarrassment. Laughing face, so you should review, although it is a free country. Disclaimer. I always think that this is pointless. It's called fanfiction for a reason, so I shall declare that Shaylin, my friend's name. Yes, I know that at random is awesome, and that I do not own Naruto, which kinda takes away from the awesome factor. Or you can assume the obvious. That didn't even make sense, but hopefully you understand. XD. Recap. No big deal, a group assignment. Oh, who was she kidding? Hinata gulped nervously. Please let her have Sasuke on her group. She pleaded against the odds and looked up at the ceiling. It was a white color. Temporarily distracted, she heard names being called. She focused back on the teacher. Hinata had always preferred to do things on her own, and she had planned on keeping it that way. The teacher had other plans though. For the second time that day she felt like slamming her head into something. Chapter 3. Tilda Technonangelover. Names were being called, and a few girls in the room gave out a sigh when Hinata's name was called with Sasuke's in tow. Hinata nearly did a little dance around the room. She figured it wouldn't be in her best interests though. Her breath froze when Naruto Uzumaki's was also called. The best, and the worst situation the teacher could possibly have given her. She closed her eyes and looked out the window trying to calm herself. Except for her plan failed when the power suddenly went out. All right students, file yourselves out the door, careful of where you step. Go to the auditorium, Haruka called out among the shrill squeaks. Hinata got out of her desk and started weaving herself to the door when a hand reached out and grabbed her arm. She just about decked the person, but caught herself when it was Sasuke. He had a concerned look in his eyes. She nodded her head and led him out the doors and into the hallway. Which way? She said looking down the different hallways. Left, down the long corridor, then follow the people. He said trying to sound confident. All right, she led him down to where he had told her to go. They walked down some stairs and into the room. It was huge. Huge was an understatement. It was ginormous. The continuous sound of feet shuffling was magnified by the echoes that bounced off the walls and ceiling. People were sitting in chairs according to their homeroom classes. Natural daylight filtered through the skylights in a full glass wall at the front. The rain's incessant pounding was very loud against the glass. Hinata glanced up just in time to see some lightning flash across the sky. Her eyes glowed in admiration. Lightning fetish. Oh, this time Sasuke took her over to their seats. It didn't matter where they sat as long as they were in their correct class. The teachers took a head count and made sure everyone was present. Tsunade came out and started walking. G to the mic that was at the side of the room, but remember the electricity was out. She shook her head and went to the front anyway, her heels clacking against the floor as she walked. She looked even more intimidating than usual with her standing on the stage in front of everybody. Hey students, hopefully this won't be a reoccurring problem. We're just going to wait in here until we can see what is the problem. So just chat quietly with each other. Her voice raised so that we could hear her over the rain. She nodded once then walked away from the center stage. The voices immediately started up as a hum then slowly escalated to an almost painful level. Hinata glanced over at Sasuke. He had his hands placed tightly over his ears with his head ducked. She reached over and gently pried one of his hands off. It's all right, Sasuke-kun. I'm here. He relaxed a little bit but replaced his hand. T.S. It had almost been an hour that Hinata and all the other students sat in the auditorium. It was hot and stuffy when the electricity came back on. Some cheers and groans were audible. Hinata blinked as her eyes got used to the fluorescent lights. She tapped Sasuke's shoulder. Hey, electricity is back on. He made a sound of acknowledgement. People started to stand. Hinata and Sasuke were no exception. Just as they stood up, someone was roughly pushed into them, sending them sprawling. Hinata winced as she landed on some previous injuries. Sasuke seemed impassive although she could see a bruise starting to bloom on his cheekbone. Hinata looked up to see the same blonde that she had encountered before. He glanced down and saw who he had bumped into. He turned back around for a moment looking at a kid with red hair for a moment in disbelief. Oi, Gaara, why'd you do that? You knew those people were in behind me. He wore an exasperated expression. Gaara looked just as stunned but regained his usual composure. Nay, sorry Sasuke-san. Naruto reached down and grabbed his head and yanked him back onto his feet. After a few moments of checking him over, he saw Hinata getting to her feet. His face flushed, ashamed that he didn't even see her. There was an awkward pause when Hinata was standing back up again. She didn't seem to be angry. In fact, there was no emotion there. Impassive, both her and Sasuke. Are you guys okay? It's all good, Dobi. Yes. Asuke winced slightly as he grinned a little. And you? I'm fine. TT thanks. She felt like whacking him, but figured that would be considered flirting, even if it was hard enough to hurt. I'm sorry, what was your name? Hinata Hyuga, her lavender eyes looking up to meet his own. Nice to meet you, Hinata-san. He smiled. She was a bit strange, yet hauntingly beautiful. Keep it moving, children, Kakashi said as if talking to toddlers. Hinata had a feeling that he was always going to be like this. Sasuke snorted Chihi and Naruto shrugged. Hinata made her way past the two boys and led the way to their English class with Mr. Yumino. The bell rung just as they made it to the classroom, signaling the beginning of lunch. They grabbed their books and separated from there. Ta went to her locker, put her binder in and slammed it shut, just for the satisfaction of seeing it denting. Apparently they are stronger than they look, and it just quivered as it clicked shut. She gave it an annoyed look. The kid that she had seen earlier with the puppy was looking at her with wide eyes. It won't kill you, you know. His puppy was hiding deep inside of his jacket, with only its head poking out the top. If he wasn't going to introduce himself, she wasn't going to make him. She turned to go but turned back around when he mumbled something. What was that? His name's Akamaru, and mine's Kiba Inuzuka, he said with slight hesitation. Nice to meet you. I'm Hinata Hyuga. As in the Hyuga, he asked in awe. Yeah, he must have seen her puzzled expression. So that means you are related to Neji. Like the Neji, his voice rising in volume. Do you guys like yaoi? 'Cause I sense a couple coming on. Whoa, down boy, what's so spectacular about that? She asked. He glared at her for the down boy comment but answered her anyway. It means that you are related to one of the most popular guys in the school. Man, If people knew about this, do you know how fast you would get yourself to the top? He asked. I don't want to be at the top. I don't want to be anywhere. She responded. He openly gaped. I gotta go to lunch. Would you like to come with? She turned around waiting for a response. Sorry, can't. Akamaru needs some time to eat too, but thanks for the offer. He smiled at her. All right, bye Kiba, Akamaru. She gave a faint smile and turned to find the cafeteria. There was an absurd amount of hallways in this school. She mumbled to herself, complaining about the way things were laid out and didn't even pay attention as she bumped right into a glass door. She glanced around, hoping that no one saw her serious zone out in near collision with the glass. Not that it really mattered anyway. She looked inside what she just walked into. What she saw had her staring in awe. There was a baby grand piano, its finish much newer than the piano that she usually used in the old music room. An assortment of other instruments lined the wall. It dawned upon her that no one would be using the music room. Not one. She took a quick glance around and walked quickly towards the door. She placed a hand on the handle, almost expecting it to set off an alarm of some kind. But door opened with just a tug of her hand. She walked in glancing to double-check if anyone was in the room. She was satisfied when she saw no one. Hinata immediately walked over to the piano. She contemplated as to what she should play. She had limited time and she would most likely only be in here on very special occasions. Hallelujah was always very hard to play on an out-of-tune piano. She shrugged and decided to play it. A.N. HTTP skeptical smiley face www. YouTube.com watch. V equals 3DZCKDZ8YU. Just remove the spaces. And sorry if the link is broken. This song is called Hallelujah. If you didn't notice that, then I suggest you see a doctor. Well, I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this. The fourth, the fifth, the minor fall and the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Your faith was strong but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty and the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to her kitchen chair, she broke your throne and she cut your hair, and from your lips she drew the hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Baby, I've been here before, I've seen this room and I've walked this floor. You know, I used to live alone before I knew you, and I've seen your flag on the marble arch, and love is not a victory march, it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Maybe there's a God above. All I've ever learned from love was how to shoot somebody who outdrew you, and it's not a cry that you hear at night, it's not somebody who's seen the light, it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. She felt as if she was being watched but shrugged it off as paranoia. She glanced at the large clock on the wall in front of her. 12:17 a.m. She still had time for one more if she hurried. She smiled as she thought of a song that she wrote. If anyone heard this one, they would surely be shocked, but it was her secret. This was her escape route from all the crap happening in her life. A.N. HTTP skeptical smiley face www. YouTube.com watch. V equals L8 is 0JMFXQG and feature equals related. And beware of Hinata's potty mouth. Haha, I love this song. XD it is called. Fuck you, Lily Allen. Look inside. Look inside your tiny mind, then look a bit harder, cuz we're so uninspired, so sick and tired of all the hatred you harbor. So you say it's not okay to be gay? Well, I think you're just evil, you're just some racist who can't tie my laces. Your point of view is medieval. FCKU. FCKU very, very much, cuz we hate what you do and we hate your whole crew, so please don't stay in touch. FCKU. FCKU very, very much, cuz your words don't translate and it's getting quite late, so please don't stay in touch. Do you get a little kick out of being small-minded? You want to be like your father, it's approval you're after. Well, that's not how you find it. Do you really enjoy living a life that's so hateful? Cuz there's a hole where your soul should be, you're losing control a bit and it's really distasteful. FCKU. FCKU very, very much cause we hate what you do and we hate your whole crew, so please don't stay in touch. FCKU very, very much cause your words don't translate and it's getting quite late, so please don't stay in touch. FCKU, 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 FCKU. You say you think we need to go to war, well, you're already in one cause it's people like you that need to get slew, no one wants your opinion. FCKU, FCKU very, very much cause we hate what you do and we hate your whole crew, so please don't stay in touch. FCKU, FCKU very, very much cause your words don't translate and it's getting quite late, so please don't stay in touch. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. She finished and looked up at the clock. It was really time for her to go. She was going to be late, on the second day of being here too. She ran out awkwardly in her boots. End of school. Hinata was putting all of her textbooks and binders into her bag. She hoisted it out of her locker and left to the main hallway. Goodbye, Shizune-san. Hinata called out. Have a good afternoon, Hinata. Shizune replied before Tsunade called her back into her office. Hinata giggled. Poor Shizune. How she put up with her. Hinata looked joyously outside. It was pouring rain. Sheets coming down. She stepped out into the chaos. Chapter 5. Hello, Zetsu style. I have another chapter for you. Sorry that this one took a lot longer. I had a 5-day migraine. It was brutal. On a happy note though, my little cousin was born. She is so beautiful. Chapter 4. Technonangelover. So far this school seemed just like any other, until Naruto went to Mr. Hatake's class. For the first 3 days they did nothing. He didn't teach them anything and therefore they didn't do anything. A few times Naruto even thought about ditching, but figured that Tsunade would have his head. Naruto was distracted by his thoughts when a dark-haired girl came into the room. He couldn't help himself as he looked her over. Petite, curvy, and lace-covered would sum up all that he could see. She scurried to the back and Naruto went back to his thoughts but was interrupted again when Mr. Hatake went and assigned them 43 questions. Crazy, absurd, out of this world kind of teaching. If you could even call it that. Naruto shook his head. He focused and gritted his teeth as he worked on them. Naruto wasn't sure if these were due at the end of class or not. And it was shocking to him when people had even turned to him, the new kid, for some help. Naruto bet that half the students had no idea what they were doing. He finished the questions before the first bell and since then he had people coming to him in a continuous trickle. He was woken from his dream-like state when a heavy thud echoed throughout the room. Miss Hinata, please refrain from interrupting my class. The teacher at the front gave an eye smile, since the rest of his face was covered. Naruto was impressed. A scarf. In this weather, either the guy was crazy or needed a sense of warmth with his obsessive privacy. A little iffy wording there, ah well. He glanced back to see the girl that he had seen come in before the bell rung, and his mind was telling he had also seen her somewhere else. He thought about it, but he couldn't recall when he might have seen her. He hardly realized he was staring at her until he felt a harsh glare come into his line of vision. Naruto looked harder into her milky lavender eyes. The black eyeliner and shadow made the contrast very sharp and very pleasing to look at. She abruptly turned away and looked out the window. He also looked outside. They were in for storm. The lightning flashed all around the dark clouds. It was coming very fast. The bell went at that moment and the teacher just motioned towards the door signaling that they could go. Naruto got his stuff and was the first one out. English arts so far with Mr. Baruka had been a blast. Debates about things that were actually interesting to learn about. Instead of the continuous droning of all the teachers before. He got his books from the locker and walked into the room. He took his seat and got his binder open but was distracted when he heard a conversation behind him. He knew that it wasn't exactly good to eavesdrop but he couldn't help himself when he heard his name involved. You know that Uzumaki guy, right? A high-pitched voice asked. No, I is not the right word. But I was aware of him, yes. A female voice replied. The voice was rich, although a stutter marred the beautiful voice. He unconsciously frowned. Anyway, did you know that he is a new transfer student? The first voice asked. News about him had already been all around the school, some of it true, some of it not. Well, I hear that he is not staying on campus. She sounded excited about it. So, the voice asked. Her tone was bored. What do you mean, so? He is so hot, she exclaimed with a tone of disbelief. Naruto rolled his eyes. Ever since he got here D-Bin drooled over like a piece of meat. A voice in his head reminded him of the instance when the dark-haired beauty came into his math class. Wasn't that what he had done? He sighed. Sometimes having a conscience was just a pain. What does that have to do with him living off campus? The voice he found so addicting questioned again. Ino, sit in your own desk please, Iruka said while making his way to the front of the room. Naruto looked over his shoulder to see who had been talking about him. It was the girl he had first met in the cafeteria his first day here and the girl he had seen in the class before. The dude's desk that she had been sitting in looked irritated and Ino scrambled out of his desk. Naruto turned to face the front again and put his thoughts into what Iruka was saying. For one of the final marks I'm going to require you to do a portfolio. It will consist of 6 rubrics. First, listening, then reading, feeling, writing, and for the conclusion I just want a refill. Session on the process of the making of this. Was it frustrating? Did you enjoy it? I would like you to be as creative and as neat as possible. Naruto sighed. Doing things neat was not one of his strong points. He was a get her done type of person. This assignment will be 30% of your mark. For one of the rubrics you are going to be required to do some group work, he said calmly while flipping through his papers. Whispering erupted from the room. Naruto put his head down on the desk. The groups would most likely be assigned anyway. Be quiet. The groups are going to be assigned. What was he saying again? Oh yeah, Iruka shuffled through his papers. He didn't care who he got in his group, as long as they did their side of the job. He hated it when he had to do all the work. A few names were called. He was only brought from his temporary stupor when Sasuke's name was called. He recalled when he had first met the Tem and Uzumaki, Naruto. He smiled at the prospect of having Sasuke in his group. He wondered who else was in his group. When no other name was called, Naruto looked around in confusion. It was at that moment that the room went dark, but the daylight still filtered through the window. All right students, file yourselves out the door, careful of where you step. Go to the auditorium, Iruka called out among the shrill squeaks. Naruto denied his urge to roll his eyes. He walked down the hallways, down some stairs and into the loud auditorium. The continuous sound of feet shuffling was magnified by the echoes that bounced off the walls and ceiling. People were sitting in chairs according to the classes that they were in during the time of the incident. Natural daylight filtered through the skylights and full glass wall at the front. The rain's incessant pounding was very loud against the glass. Tsunade came up on stage and the entire auditorium went quiet. Nobody wanted to get on her bad side. Even if the thought was irrational as a school body, they still gave her their utmost attention. Hey students, hopefully this won't be a reoccurring problem. We're just going to wait in here until we can see what is going on. So just chat quietly with each other. Our voice was raised so that we could hear her over the rain. She nodded her head once and then walked off the stage. The voices immediately started up as a hum then slowly escalated to a near painful level. Naruto enjoyed the lively chatter and started talking to Gaara. It was about an hour when the electricity came back on. Naruto blinked a few times to get used to the new light that invaded his eye sockets. Naruto and Gaara stood up, and then there was a big flash of lightning and Naruto heard a girly squeal come from beside him. He was surprised to see Gaara. His face was bright red and he had his hand over his mouth. He was glaring at Naruto, daring him to say something. Naruto shook his head and started laughing. Naruto tried to stop another bout of laughter and ended up wheezing out the last of his question. That you? Naruto started laughing again as Gaara's face went an even deeper shade of red. It rivaled with his hair, and that was a feat in itself. Annoyed, Gaara gave him a hard shove and Naruto, who was caught off guard, toppled over into some other people. Oi, Gaara, why do you do that? You knew those people were in behind me. He stood up abruptly with an exasperated expression on his face. Gaara looked stunned for a moment but then regained his usual composure. Hey man, I pushed you but you fell on your own, idiot. Naruto ignored Gaara and turned around to help whoever he had knocked down. Nay, sorry Sasuke-san. Naruto leaned down and grabbed his hand and yanked him back onto his feet. After a few moments of checking him over, he saw Hinata getting to her feet. Naruto's face flushed. He hadn't even seen her. There was an awkward pause when Hinata was back up on her feet. She didn't seem to be angry. In fact, there was no emotion there. Impassive, both her and Sasuke. It sorta scared Naruto. It made them a lot harder to read. Are you guys okay? It's all good, Dobi. Sasuke winced slightly as he grinned a little. And you? He asked, still sort of embarrassed that he hadn't helped her up. I'm fine. TT thanks. She looked kinda pissed, but at the same time kept up the bored look. I'm sorry, what was your name? Naruto asked, out of confirmation. Hinata, Hyuga, her lavender eyes looking up to meet his own. Nice to meet you, Hinata-san. He smiled. She was a bit strange, yet hauntingly beautiful. Naruto felt a strange attraction to this girl. It was far stronger than any other he had before. Keep it moving, children, Kakashi said as if talking to toddlers. Hinata had a feeling that he was always going to be like this. Asuke snorted Chihi and Naruto shrugged. Hinata made her way past the two boys and led the way to their English class with Mr. Yumino. The bell rung just as they made it to the classroom, signaling the beginning of lunch. They grabbed their books and separated from there. Naruto put his books in his locker before deciding it was time to explore. He wore a wide grin on his face and got a weird looks as he walked around suspiciously. After a few minutes, the hallways cleared out and Naruto got down to business. He had seen a door earlier and backtracked to it. He turned the handle and pushed open the door. He stepped back, almost expecting someone to be in there. When it appeared to be that no one was going to pop out randomly, he stuck his head in the door. It appeared to be a muse. IC room and an assortment of instrument cases were piled into the corners of the dark room. He looked at a few, then approached the connecting door. This time he pulled it after he had tried to push it a few times. He froze as he saw a person coming in the other door. Crap, was his immediate thought as he pushed the door connecting shut. He heard footsteps approaching the door and he prayed to whoever it was would have a forgiving personality. Maybe he could pretend he was lost. Nah, whoever it was wasn't naive enough to take that as an answer. The footsteps stopped though and never came any closer. In fact, they started to walk away. He pulled the door so that he could take a peek. It was Hinata and she appeared to be completely relaxed as she opened the cover on the piano. After she sat down, she didn't do anything. She just sat there. Naruto stared in confusion. Was she going to play? Eventually he saw her shrug and place her small hands on the piano keys. It was a version of Hallelujah that he hadn't heard before. He felt as if he was invading her privacy, but he couldn't help it. He was curious as to how her voice would sound when she was singing. If he liked her voice when she was talking, how it would sound when she was singing. If she was going to sing his reminded himself. He didn't need to wonder long before the first line began. I really enjoy Brian Cray N's version of this, but you can use whatever version you want. XD. Well, I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this. The fourth, the fifth, the minor fall and the major lift, the baffled king composing Hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Your faith was strong but you needed of you saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty and the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to her kitchen chair, she broke your throne and she cut your hair, and from your lips she drew the hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Baby, I've been here before, I've seen this room and I've walked this floor. You know, I used to live alone before I knew you, and I've seen your flag on Marble Arch, and love is not a victory march, it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Maybe there's a God above. All I've ever learned from love was how to shoot somebody who outdrew you, and it's not a cry that you hear at night, it's not somebody who's seen the light, it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Naruto was shocked. She was good. No, not good, amazing. Naruto was so shocked that he nearly let the door slam shut. But he grabbed it at the last second. He was happy to hear the piano begin again. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.